let's dive into one of the most dramatic and honestly fascinating transformations on the entire planet, the one that turns a kid into an adult. Now, it can be a time of huge, sometimes really confusing change, but it's also completely natural. So today, we're going to break down the blueprint for growing up.
So, meet Alex. Lately, Alex feels like their body has a mind of its own. You know, a sudden growth spurt out of nowhere, a voice that cracks without any warning, and this rush of new feelings. Alex is just thinking, what is happening to me? If any of that sounds even a little familiar, well, you're in exactly the right place.
So, what do we even call this strange in-between time? You know, this chapter where you're not quite a kid anymore, but you're not an adult yet. Well, it has a name, and it's the official start of a pretty major life adventure.
It's called adolescence. Just think of it like your body's biggest software update ever, and it usually runs from about age 11 all the way to 18 or 19. And since this covers the teens, 13, 14, and so on, it's why we call adolescents, well, teenagers. It's a pre-programmed phase of life for every single one of us.
Now, if adolescence is the whole journey, then puberty is like the starting pistol that kicks the whole thing off. Puberty is this specific set of changes that makes a person capable of reproduction. It's the biological signal that says, okay, the major construction work is about to begin, for Alex and for everyone.
So what do these renovations actually look like? Well, every person's body follows a kind of biological blueprint. Let's check out the major changes that are on the schedule.
The puberty blueprint has some universal milestones. First up, that sudden, sometimes awkward increase in height. That's the long bones in your arms and legs stretching out. Then, your body shape starts to change, your voice might do some pretty strange things, and new hair starts to appear under your arms and in the pubic area, and, of course, the development of sex organs. And, the blueprints do have some differences. For boys, the shoulders typically get broader and muscles become more defined. For girls, the region below the waist widens. These changes aren't random at all. They're very specific preparations for adulthood.
And what about the voice? That's a big one for Alex. In boys, the voice box, also known as the larynx, gets much larger. This is what causes the voice to deepen and creates that visible bump in the throat we call the Adam's apple. And as the muscles get used to this new size, the voice might crack or sound hoarse, which is completely normal and totally temporary.
All these external changes, like facial hair in boys or the development of breasts in girls, they actually have a scientific name: secondary sexual characters. They're basically the features that help distinguish males from females, but they aren't directly part of the reproductive system itself.
Okay, so we've seen what changes, but how does your body know when to even start? Who's pulling the strings behind the scenes for Alex? Well, it's time to meet the body's secret messengers.
I mean, this is the big question, right? It can feel like all these changes are just happening to you, but there's actually a really sophisticated control system inside your body orchestrating the whole thing.
And that control center? It's the endocrine system. It's a whole network of glands that produce and send out special chemical messages. You can think of it as your body's own internal internet, sending instructions to all the different parts.
And what about those chemical messages? They're called hormones. Hormones are really the stars of the show here. They get released into your bloodstream and travel to specific target sites with very clear instructions, like, hey, start growing hair here, or time to make the voice box bigger. And it all works like a chain of command. It starts with the boss. That's the pituitary gland in your brain. It sends out an order to the factories, which are the testes in boys and the ovaries in girls. These factories then produce their own messengers, testosterone for boys and estrogen for girls. And then these hormones travel through the body to deliver their instructions.
So what's the ultimate goal of this entire, really complex process? Well, it's all about preparing the body for the next phase of life, reaching reproductive maturity.
In females, this phase kicks off at puberty with something called menarche. That's the very first menstrual period. From that point on, a cycle called menstruation happens about once every month. This whole reproductive phase continues until menopause, which usually happens somewhere between the ages of 45 and 50.
And speaking of reproduction, this brings us to one of biology's most fundamental questions. Deep inside ourselves, there's a code that determines whether a baby will be a boy or a girl. So how does that code actually work?
It all comes down to these tiny little structures in our cells called chromosomes. We have 23 pairs, but one special pair determines sex. Females have 2 X chromosomes, so XX. Males have 1 X and 1 Y, so XY. Now, since an egg from the mother always carries an X chromosome, the outcome depends completely on whether the sperm from the father is carrying an X or a Y.
And that means it is the chromosome from the father that determines the sex of a baby. So if a sperm with an X chromosome fertilizes the egg, the baby will be a girl, XX. If a Y-carrying sperm gets there first, the baby will be a boy, XY. And this is why that old belief that the mother is somehow responsible is just scientifically incorrect. So now that we understand the how and the why of all this, let's talk about taking care of yourself during all this rapid growth. I think Alex could use this part. Let's think of this as the owner's manual for navigating adolescence. The toolkit for a healthy journey is actually pretty straightforward. First, a balanced diet is non-negotiable. Your body is basically a construction site right now, and it needs high-quality fuel. Personal hygiene is also key since your sweat glands become way more active. Physical exercise keeps your body fit and strong as it grows. And finally, one of the most powerful tools you have is simply the ability to say no to things like addictive drugs.
All right, we followed Alex on this whole journey of discovery from total confusion to real understanding. So now it's time for the epilogue challenge, a final test to see what we've all learned.
Okay, here's the final riddle that Alex and all of us should be able to answer now. What exactly is menstruation?
So, here's the answer. About once a month, the wall of the uterus thickens to prepare a safe home just in case a fertilized egg arrives. If fertilization doesn't happen, well, that thickened lining is no longer needed, so the body simply sheds it, along with its blood vessels. That shedding process is menstruation, and understanding this turns what might seem like a total mystery into simple biology, a perfect final step on our journey through the amazing age of adolescence.